In the heart of every community, there are unseen heroes, individuals whose quiet dedication shapes lives without ever seeking recognition. But what happens when one of the world's greatest legends returns to honor the very person who once opened a door for him? This is the extraordinary tale of how Michael Jordan, a name synonymous with greatness, stepped back into his humble beginnings to pay tribute to a janitor whose simple act of kindness changed the course of history. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments and subscribe to Timeless Stories, the channel where stories of kindness, resilience, and hope come to life. It was a bright, golden afternoon when Michael Jordan's sleek black SUV glided into the parking lot of Brookfield High School, the place where his childhood dreams had first taken root. The school had changed over the years, its facade now adorned with modern glass and vibrant murals, yet the air still carried whispers of old ambitions, unrelenting practice sessions, and quiet moments of self-doubt that eventually forged a champion. Michael sat for a moment, hands resting on the wheel, letting the memories of his younger self flood back. He wasn't the high-flying athlete of his youth anymore. Now 62, his steps were slower, his face framed by lines of both victory and loss. But one thing hadn't changed: his deep gratitude for the humble roots that shaped his journey. With a steady breath, Michael stepped out into the familiar air of Brookfield, the scent of polished floors and worn leather gym mats filling his senses. These were the hallways that built him, each creak of the old gym doors a reminder of countless early mornings when no one was watching, and every shot he took was a silent promise to himself. As he walked past rows of trophy cases and faded team photographs, Michael noticed two students huddled together, engrossed in a debate about a new video game. They didn't recognize him, just a tall man in a ball cap and a leather jacket. Michael smiled softly. Once he had been just another unnoticed kid in these hallways, dreaming of something bigger. The heavy doors to the gym groaned as they opened, and Michael stood still for a moment, taking it all in. The gym had been updated: digital scoreboards, fresh paint, even a mural depicting one of his most iconic slam dunks. But under all the polish, the spirit of the place was the same: a sacred space where dreams were either broken or born. In the far corner, mopping the scuffed floor with deliberate care, was an elderly janitor. His name was Mr. Lawrence, and his weathered hands moved with the ease of someone who had spent decades caring for this place, his quiet devotion leaving behind an invisible legacy. "Excuse me," Michael said softly as he approached. The janitor paused, leaning on his mop handle, eyes squinting to place the familiar face. "Aren't you—" Michael started, hesitant. Mr. Lawrence's eyes widened with disbelief. "Michael Jordan?" His voice cracked with wonder. "Is that really you?" The handshake between them was brief, but the embrace that followed was long and heartfelt, a silent tribute to years of unspoken gratitude. The pair found themselves at Maggie's Diner, a beloved local spot known for its checkered floors and faded photos of hometown heroes. They settled into a corner booth, ordering cheeseburgers and chocolate milkshakes, simple comfort food, the kind that needed no improvement. Over the gentle hum of conversation, Mr. Lawrence reminisced about his decades at Brookfield High, arriving before dawn, leaving long after the halls fell silent. He spoke of the pride he felt knowing he kept the place running, even if most never noticed. Michael listened quietly, memories surfacing of early mornings when the gym doors were locked. Except for one time, when Mr. Lawrence had quietly unlocked them, offering young Michael a chance to practice alone. "You told me every great player starts by proving they belong," Michael said, voice thick with emotion. "I was ready to quit that day, but you gave me a key to the gym and to believing in myself." Mr. Lawrence smiled humbly. "I just believed every kid deserved a chance." That night, under a sky brushed with the last light of day, Michael made a decision. Fame, wealth, and schedules could wait. Some debts were too important to leave unpaid. Mr. Lawrence's years of service had earned more than a quiet retirement. They deserved honor, dignity, and comfort. Michael called in favors, summoned a team of builders, designers, and volunteers. His plan wasn't just to renovate Mr. Lawrence's modest home, it was to create a living tribute to the power of unseen kindness. Within days, the quiet street where Mr. Lawrence lived bustled with life. Contractors unloaded lumber and tools, neighbors brought coffee and sandwiches, and old teammates of Michael's showed up with tool belts and sleeves rolled up. Everyone knew this wasn't just a home makeover, it was a community's way of saying thank you. Narrow hallways were widened, an accessible bathroom was designed for Mrs. Lawrence, and a new ramp replaced the rickety front steps. Every inch of the home was touched by care, from the hardwood floors to the custom-built display case for Mr. Lawrence's scrapbooks, a chronicle of a lifetime spent serving others. Before the reveal, Michael hosted a surprise dinner for Mr. and Mrs. Lawrence at the Lakeside Inn, a serene restaurant with gentle views of the water. Familiar faces filled the room, former students, teachers, and neighbors, all gathered to honor a man who had once been invisible to most but essential to all. One by one, guests stood and shared stories, how a kind word from Mr. Lawrence gave them courage, how his quiet acts of generosity reminded them they mattered. Michael stood last. Mr. Lawrence believed in me before anyone knew my name, Michael said. Tonight, we honor not just a man, but a legacy of kindness. Every great story starts with someone like him. The next morning, under a brilliant sun, the Lawrences returned to their street. Where their worn-out home once stood, a beautiful, fully accessible house now greeted them. A red ribbon stretched across the front door, the final touch on a tribute years in the making. With trembling hands, Mr. Lawrence cut the ribbon. Inside, natural light poured through new windows, highlighting every thoughtful detail, from wide doorways to a garden designed for Mrs. Lawrence to enjoy from her wheelchair. In the center of the living room, the display case stood proudly, holding the story of his life in photos, letters, and mementos. I never thought anyone would remember, Mr. Lawrence whispered. Michael placed a steady hand on his shoulder. You opened a door for me. Today, we open a door for you. As neighbors cheered and old friends embraced, Michael unveiled the final surprise, the Lawrence Legacy Foundation, dedicated to honoring school custodians, cafeteria workers, and other unseen heroes across the country. Mr. Lawrence, with tears in his eyes, accepted the role of its first honorary director. His life's work would not only be remembered, but would inspire a movement to recognize those who quietly make the world better. As the sun set, casting golden light across the transformed home, Michael and Mr. Lawrence stood together, no longer just athlete and janitor, but two men whose lives were forever intertwined by kindness. Every act of compassion ripples outward, touching lives we may never know. Who is the unsung hero in your community? Share their story in the comments, and if this story inspired you, subscribe to Timeless Stories, where the quietest acts of kindness become the loudest echoes of hope. Because sometimes the smallest key opens the greatest doors.